Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Pearlman.
Hello. For the next half hour, we are going to be talking about the wonder of nature after dark with my guest, Charles Hood. He is Professor Emeritus at Antelope Valley College and has authored over 20 books, including his most recent, Nocturnalia, Nature in the Western Night. He has published other books, including Wild Sonoma, with a foreword by Jane Goodall, and A Salad Only the Devil Would Eat, which was named the Nonfiction Book of the Year by the editors of the Forward Book Review. His earlier book, Wild L.A., was named a Nonfiction Book of the Year by the California Association of Independent Booksellers. His nature study has taken him to over 50 states and 80 countries, from New Guinea to Madagascar to the South Pole. And during these journeys, he has encountered 6,500 species of birds and over 1,000 species of mammals. And he has published over 800 photographs. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us again.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to talk to you too, Nancy.
I thoroughly enjoyed this delightful book because you have humor in it. You have ways that people can go out and enjoy nature in the dark, guiding them in the process. You have gorgeous photographs of all sorts of animals, and including the night sky. I thought at first I was going to be reading another natural history book describing the behavior of all these animals, but instead you explain why they enjoy the night or why they are active in the night. So let's begin with the fact that animals and plants are both active in the day and the night, but why do you love seeing them in the dark?
I really think we have a misperception in our general society, our society meaning Western European society, American European societies, in that we're kind of taught to be afraid of the dark, and that includes wanting security lights, lock the door, get your kids in, do you know where your kids are after dark? And that is unfortunate because it's really depriving us of the other half of nature. We all know intuitively nature is a 24-hour business. It doesn't just switch itself off when the sun goes down, but I think too many people are trained by society to be mistrusting of the night, mistrusting of their ability to navigate the night. And so in this book, Jose and I are really hoping to reverse that and open up the night for our readers, our listeners here in Radio Land, to feel encouraged. Hey, there's a lot out there. Let's go out and see it together.
You mentioned Jose, who was your co-author. He's a bat biologist, José Gabriel Martinez-Fonseca, and you do have a section of the bats and explain the variety of bats, and the pictures again are stunning because you have small ones, big ones. Again, there's a misconception about these flying mammals because even the vampire bat doesn't really want to eat human beings.
That is true. A vampire, which is a relatively small species from Central and South America, has zero interest in us. We're not. What it really likes are sort of drowsy pigs, and the amount of blood it takes is relatively small. But you're right that there's a lot going on in the bat world. There are 1,472 species of bats worldwide. So the only thing that's a larger group would be rodents. So there's many more bats than there are, for example, eagles or owls, or even antelope. So it's a very diverse group, from these very small bats, like here in the western United States, we have something called canyon bat, formerly called western pipistrelle. Very small bat, would just, even with the wings extended, it would fit in the palm of your hand. And then here in North America, all the way up to a bat with a 2-foot wingspan. And of course, if we look internationally, some of the bats that are flying foxes, that are fruiting bats, they get into 5.5 foot wingspans. There's a great dynamic range. And bats can do everything from eating insects, as we know, but they also pollinate saguaro cacti in the southwest. There are bats that eat frogs. There are bats that eat fish. They can hear the fish swimming and catch them with their feet. So there's a lot going on with bats, and people, I think, again, have been trained to be afraid or think that they're all going to harm us, and that's just poppycock. Bats are here to help us, not harm us.
While I love seeing the wildlife on safari in Africa, one of my most memorable experiences was in Malaysia on the island of Borneo, standing in a cave and watching 6 million bats fly out that one night. It's spectacular.
We can have those experiences here in the United States, depending where you live. So you are probably familiar with the Congress Avenue Bridge in Austin, Texas.
Wonderful place.
Free-tailed bats. Yeah, wonderful. And it's lovely. It's a party. You know, everyone's having a good time. You can get an adult beverage if you were so inclined, or take a river trip. And there are 20 million Mexican free-tailed bats that live in the expansion joints under the bridges. In Northern California, you can have a similar experience near Davis, California, where they come out under the I-80 bridge at the Yellow Bypass. But even in urban Los Angeles, home of the concrete wasteland and all the other urban legends, there are bats that live in those bridges too. So they are part of our city environment, and they are helping us by eating crop pests. If you like organic rice, it probably came from a field that was kept insect-free by the bats eating the moths that are going to become the worms that are going to ruin the crops. So we like bats because they really reduce pesticide use.
How did you come up with the name of your book, and what does it really mean?
Nocturnalia is a celebration of night, and it came from my publisher, but there's a slight disagreement in-house who invented the word first. So thank you to Kaylee, who works for Heyday Books in Berkeley, California. I have to say it wasn't my title, much as I would like to take credit for it. We just called it Nature After Dark. That was the working title for 2 years. And then Nocturnalia, what a great jazzy word, came out of Heyday itself. So thank you to my editorial team.
You do talk about some of the animals that have adapted to the urban environment. We know that some bird species have taken roost in human buildings, not just trees or bushes. We know that in the urban environment, coyotes are very adaptable. I see them in my own neighborhood here in the city of Los Angeles. What animals function better in the urban environment versus the natural environment, or do they just learn to adapt for survival?
There are more coyotes now than there ever have been. So they are happy about two things, and this is despite national persecution of coyotes here in the United States. But coyotes are very happy because, of course, we got rid of the wolves, their primary competitor, so they're able to expand their range that way. And then they love the fact that we have done so many things to enhance their food options. So whether that's leaving pet food out on the back porch, leaving the pets themselves out in the backyard, even things like fruit in backyard fruiting trees, the urban coyotes are incredibly adroit at managing to navigate from yard to yard and kind of power line strip to power line strip, find water, find places to den, and they deserve our praise, I think, for how successful they have managed to inhabit a world not of their own making, but they are managing to turn it into something that they can raise their own young in and just thrive. They don't complain, they just merely adapt and thrive, and there might be a lesson in that for the rest of us.
There are some species of animals I really would love to see in the wild but have not encountered, like the mountain lion, which has many names, the puma, and yet, as you point out in the book, they might be seeing us even though we don't see them.
Yeah, I think the puma population, like in the state of California right now, is given in the sort of the 3,000 range. Originally, I was thinking maybe even 5,000, but it's been downward, adjusted a little bit. As of today, when you and I are speaking to record this, there's a new puma in Griffith Park in Los Angeles to replace P-22. Hasn't been captured yet, hasn't been numbered, but it was reported by a civilian, so to speak, who saw it in their yard. So that, yes, the pumas are around, kind of keep an informal census. If you hike enough, mountain bike enough, sooner or later you will see your wild puma. José Gabriel got his in Madera Canyon in southeastern Arizona on a night drive. I think I'm up to 5 that I've seen. So sooner or later they'll cross your path. But of course they have seen you, 100 times that you've been out hiking. And of course going out at the twilight hour is a little bit better than going out in the middle of the day say, if your goal is to see a bobcat or a puma or even a coyote in general, obviously we need to encounter them at their peak hunting times. So that would be dawn and dusk more likely.
But what we do see, whether or not it's in the built environment or the natural environment, and we can see them day and night, are birds. But yet some birds are more visible in the daytime, or some birds like to fly at night. I enjoyed learning about your description of bird migrations, and some of these birds, I just absolutely can't believe they fly non-stop for thousands of miles.
Yeah, some of the Pacific shorebirds that are going from Alaskan breeding grounds to then winter in the South Pacific, yeah, they've got to cross the entire ocean. There's no daily stop. A warbler or a tanager coming up from Costa Rica can go to West Mexico and then ultimately Southern California and then on into their Sierra Nevada breeding range perhaps. But yeah, some of the seabirds do have to go, not just nonstop across the Gulf of Mexico like a little ruby-throated hummingbird from Maryland or something, but if you're going from Alaska all the way down to the South Pacific, that's a pretty serious journey. You're absolutely right. And they have to not only fly but avoid predators because there are things out trying to eat them, and they have to navigate. So there's an astounding world happening all around us in the nighttime. One way to know about nocturnal migration is through sound. So there are those people even in Los Angeles who do a simple thing like put their iPhone on automatic record and just listen for flight calls as birds pass over during the nighttime. A flock of birds migrating is going to kind of say, hey, I'm over here. Are you over here? And they have these little contact calls, not like the full song when they're on territory of, hey, this is my tree, stay away, but just little, hey, how you guys doing over there? And if you record those and analyze them, you can find out, oh, wow, last night there were 10 species that flew over my condo along the LA River kind of idea.
In fact, throughout the book Nocturnalia, Nature in the Western Night, you emphasize the importance of citizens to provide data to scientists about what they see and what they hear. Various websites, various apps to help identify what is going on in nature and how many species are there and what they're doing.
I'm old enough to remember when we didn't have smartphones, and I remain a little skeptical about what they've done for society. But it is true, you've got a camera and you've got a way of knowing where you are. So particularly if you see something reasonably large and stationary, like a large moth or a snake, you can get a picture, document where you are, upload it to like iNaturalist, for example. I recommend them. And even if you don't know what it is, somebody on the forum, on the collective community will be able to confirm your identity. And then you can document that, hey, this thing is here at this particular point in time. And that collectively creates a great, robust body of data that everybody is happy to see. And so whether it's snakes or frogs or moths or birds, plants, night blooming plants, hey, take a picture, figure it out, share it with everybody else. And over time, you might be surprised, our listeners might be surprised, how many sightings they have seen in the last 5 years or 10 years or 1 year. It all adds up.
And you also provide ideas of how to go hiking at night if one is new to the idea.
Sure, and I want to encourage all of us, we want to be safe, of course. If you think some of us are more vulnerable to sexual exploitation than others or to racial profiling, depending on how the police are operating in your area. So obviously we need to be cognizant of some objective risks. But in general, nighttime is much, much safer than people perceive. And certainly snakes aren't going to come flying out of the sky to bite you or, the ground won't swallow you up kind of idea. But if you're a little bit hesitant, just find a nice trail, could just be a half mile long, and walk it in the daytime, kind of learn your route. And then you come back in the evening, of course, have more than one flashlight because inevitably batteries die and things break and you drop things, but a backup flashlight. And then you get to have a different kind of sensory experience at night. How the air smells is something you'll notice. That might be a little bit higher humidity at night, or simply turning your vision down a little bit makes you rely on smelling things, hearing things in ways that we don't do during the day nearly as much. So it's a very rich, alternate kind of experience on the traditional kind of hike. You can slow down a little bit and just enjoy the night blooming smells that are coming out of the plant. Really great. Tree frogs, crickets, complete symphony.
We are going to talk more about all the wonderful creatures and experiences of nature at night when we return in a moment with my guest, Charles Hood.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman continues with further discussion of the world's critical ecological issues. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, here's Nancy.
I'm speaking with Charles Hood. He is Professor Emeritus at Antelope Valley College, has authored over 20 books, including his current book, Nocturnalia, Nature in the Western Night. When you prepared this book, you actually felt it necessary to start not with the plants and animals, but with night, the sky. You described how the stars are very valuable to helping navigate the area, how people and animals have used the sky. Could you explain the importance of understanding the night sky? Because here in Los Angeles, we have too much light pollution and one doesn't get to see the stars.
It is true. We have kind of voluntarily reduced our heritage. And I think if people had been out to see a dark sky environment and then had a vote, like, do we want to change the street lighting? Everybody would think, oh, yeah, I liked that time when I went to Death Valley or Anza Borrego or Joshua Tree and I got to see the Milky Way. But because people are ignorant of what they're missing, they don't mind the fact that we've overlit the heck out of everything. And I'll just mention like the typical shopping mall. Now, there's no reason we need to have it lit all night long with as many lights as we have, or to have lights pointing upwards instead of downward. There's ways we could reduce our visual impact on the sky without having to degrade safety or make it so that we feel insecure in some kind of a way. Because after all, the night sky is this remarkable tour of time. We're looking at light that took millions and millions of years to arrive here, but it's also just visually stunning. If you actually can see the Milky Way in the summer in Death Valley, for example, all the sublime narrative from the 19th century applies here in terms of awesome in the old-fashioned sense of creating awe, wonder, stupefaction, joy, grandeur, wonder. If you want to think that there's a heavenly power out there, bigger and older and more magnificent than we are, the night sky is a great way to access those kinds of feelings. And of course, there's this great orb, the moon, floating around there, always doing its thing. There are the other planets that you can see with just regular binoculars. I think people forget that Galileo, when he saw the moons of Jupiter, was using a telescope that's less good than the average pair of cheap beginning birdwatching binoculars. Our optics are so good now that even on the bottom end of the scale, you have the ability to discern moons of other planets, and certainly the planets themselves. So there's a lot that can be done if only we just stop, take a moment, and you can see the moon, of course, even in Los Angeles, or just go an hour out of town, out of any of the cities, an hour out of the big cities, and then give yourself a chance to say, wow, I really like this. I like seeing all these stars.
When one is not looking up, one can look down and see many other kinds of animals that you have absolutely stunning photographs of, whether or not it's frogs or newts or spiders or snakes or moths or many different kinds of insects that inhabit our land. It's hard to describe all these incredible creatures that are part of our ecosystem, and you also explain some of their relationships with various plants and plants that actually might bloom at night so that the insects can pollinate them.
Sure. If you're a flower, day is a very competitive time to be attracting pollinators, whether that's a bee or a hummingbird or a moth or something, that everybody else out there is also trying to be bright and aromatic. And it costs the plant a lot of energy to produce a bloom. So you want to, get the most pollination access for your blooming buck. So some plants have decided, hey, if we go out at night, we have to have a little different strategy. We need to be white, so we're visible in the moonlight, and we need to be kind of big and showy, and we need a strong odor, but we're actually competing with fewer other plants. So something like the saguaro cactus, it is only pollinated by bats. That is how it works. It's got these lovely white flowers up at the top. And one reason a cactus wants to bloom at night is there's less evaporation, less solar solar intensity coming down, so that they can maintain the blossom and have the nectar without having it boil away. If we think of how hot Phoenix is, for example, in the middle of the day, in the middle of summer, blooming at night makes a lot of sense. And then the bats come down and got a long snout, and they get down deep in the flower, get completely covered in pollen all over their bodies, and then they go on and they pollinate the next flower just because they've got so much pollen all on their fur. Hummingbirds like to eat insects, particularly during the breeding season. They don't just only eat flower nectar, but the pollinating bats of the American Southwest, they don't have that adroitness to catch insects in midair like a hummingbird does. So what they do is they get protein by actually eating the pollen itself. They can lick it off their fur and digest it. Hummingbirds don't work that way. Their tongues can't reach their own tummies, but even if they could, they're not set up to digest pollen. They need to either eat nectar or eat an insect. Those are the two things that our hummingbirds have options for here in North America. But our North American nectar bats, they can eat pollen. So they're getting kind of an interesting diet that way. But those things are coming from the plants themselves at night.
I loved reading your descriptions of how these plants and animals interact in our ecosystem. I'm looking at one page where you show 3 different red and black snakes and ask us to identify which one's venomous. I'm not too successful here. A lot of people are afraid these other snakes decide to do some mimicry.
Sure, that Batesian mimicry. If you're teaching biology, that's called Batesian mimicry, where they're trying to kind of coattail. Like some of the butterflies will do that too. Like we know that a monarch is distasteful to a bird, so other butterflies try to look like monarch butterflies. People don't need to worry too much about the red and black snakes. There used to be a rhyme, red on black, friend of Jack, or something like that. Turns out it's not really very accurate, so we don't give that rhyme out anymore. Red on yellow kills a fellow was the rhyme. But luckily for us, the coral snakes who have that red, black, yellow pattern, they don't really involve themselves with people. To get bitten by one is a serious problem, but you'd have to try really, really hard, like grab it, shake it around, whack it on your hood of your car, and then stick your finger in its mouth. And by golly, it's going to bite you. And by golly, at that time, you're in deep doo-doo. You better get to the hospital right quick. But normally coral snakes avoid us, and they don't have a big wide gape like a rattlesnake or something. But it is true, yes, other snakes try to look, like mountain king snakes, they try to look like a coral snake because they want to convince hawks not to bug them, coyotes and bears and other things that might predate them. So yeah, we did do a little quiz there with long-nosed snake and king snake. That was actually fun to lay out in the book. For your listeners, it can be fun to write a book, and that was one of the fun pages to organize.
I loved your humor throughout your writing and descriptions of enjoying nature. I also enjoy the absolutely beautiful close-up pictures of animals that we normally don't get too close up to see, whether or not they're beetles or spiders or moths or other kinds of insects. And you point out that bugs, scientifically, are not always bugs.
Well, we don't have great language in English, do we? There's lots of things we don't really have a great term for. So, yes, technically a bug is a very narrow brand. We use bugs in conversation language to cover everything, but of course a bug is just a very small category of the larger insect world. But I'm happy that the book worked for you. Honestly, it'd be lovely to be on your show. Thank you very much. But I'm also happy to hear your enthusiasm because it means we did do our job. For your listeners, it is hard to be a writer. You're not quite sure, is this the right tone? Have I included too much? Not enough? And with the photography, José Gabriel and I really tried hard to do pictures that negate people's negative feelings or reverse people's negative feelings and say, hey, this is actually kind of beautiful, even kind of sexy. So whenever we shoot bats, for example, we really try hard to make the bat look friendly, approachable. Some of the close-up pictures, we've caught them in a net and we're holding the bat. And, the bat sometimes has a mild disposition, doesn't mind. Other bats are a little bit more resistant. They're like, hey, let me go, you sucker. I'm going to bite you.
And even the pictures of the skunks, the raccoons, the kangaroo rat, the mice, the other animals that one can see, the multiple kinds of birds from hawks to owls to just so many beautiful animals that you have presented and described. Is there a favorite, or is the next one you see your favorite?
No, I have to confess that we do have a soft spot for bats, and it is true Jose did his doctoral work on bats, but he also works with other animal groups. But privately, we just, I think, are attracted to them because they're so varied and they're so misunderstood. We feel like we're a little bit ambassadors when we're out there. But one of the things about our photographs that we really tried hard to do in the book is to underlight them, if that makes any sense. We have that expression like a deer in the headlights, and maybe we've all seen those party pictures from the 1970s where a flash went off and everybody looks nuked. And we really, really, really try to underlight the situation so that we're not startling the animal and it's not just sort of overexposed in this huge white blast of light. But instead, we actually are using fashion photography tricks tricks to try to soften the light and to wrap it around the animals, and also doing some basic tricks like one of the kangaroo rats that you mentioned. We simply just put it in a box so there'd be no distracting dirt and just focus on just let the gorgeous animalicity of the animal speak for itself by putting it on a white background and using heavily diffused lighting. In that case, that little guy was in the Mojave Desert, and we always make sure we only interact with the animal very briefly, and then we release it back to its burrow. And in my case, I've got a lot of liberal guilt for my interaction with the animal, so we have this little offering we make of peanut butter and oatmeal. So the animal came away in a better situation than when we started the photo shoot 10 minutes before.
As a naturalist, you maintain lists of the animals and the plants and the birds that you have seen. It's very unusual to see over 1,000 species of mammals. Was there a favorite?
I have one that I've missed. I missed snow leopard in Mongolia, so I've got to go back and work on that one again, and I've yet to look for narwhal. But I really was excited to see lemurs in Madagascar. Not the diurnal ones that we perhaps have seen in zoos, but there actually are a lot of lemurs that are nocturnal. So yes, number 1,000, cross-leaf dwarf lemur, that has a little place in my heart. But just seeing all of them together and realizing, wow, there are so many ways to subdivide habitat that we don't really notice when we're blundering along as these tall, bipedal, relatively ignorant primates that we are. But the world itself is actually able to say, hey, this little niche is being filled by this particular little animal. And I find that really exciting.
You have written many different books about different areas. You do live in Southern California, and you get out into our deserts and mountains regularly. Is there a favorite locale that you want to share, or do you want to keep it private?
Oh, we have to keep it private. I'm sure you've got yours too.
Correct.
But really, any of the federal parks, whether it's the Channel Islands or Yosemite, Sequoia, and Death Valley, they're all famous for very, very good reasons. And if you go at night in the off-season, you can have a relatively pristine experience. I tell people, look at the map and go to the closest park nearest to you, and then work your way out from there.
If people want to contact you, get more information, maybe go out into the night, into nature with you, how do they reach you? What's your website?
Thank you for asking. I do get email at my writer's website. That is charleshoodbooks.com. So those are 3 words spelled as one word on the internet search. CharlesHoodbooks.com.
I really hope to see another edition with even more beautiful pictures and descriptions of these animals that we can encounter, and learn not to be afraid of them. You have pictures of scorpions and black widow spiders and moths and other kinds of animals that some people may think are dangerous but really aren't.
That is very true. You could, I guess, die from a scorpion bite if you were allergic or in very ill health. But in North America, we don't need to worry about scorpions. Again, they're only going to bug you if you're bugging them, and they're really no worse than like a bee sting or something. But here's something for our listeners. It really is true. They glow in the dark. Scorpions glow in the dark. So even a $10 UV flashlight will not only help you find scorpions in the desert, but you can find lichen that glows in the dark. Not all lichen glows in the dark, but some does. It glows under UV light. So some of the UV flashlights get expensive. You can spend $100 or something, but even a cheap one will show you that some of the arachnids, some of the other spiders glow as well. It's just a way to kind of open up a night hike. Great thing for kids. Kids love to run around with flashlights and find things, so no need to be afraid.
We certainly have to get out to see the animals and look closely, because some of the birds, like the owls, are camouflaged. You might be looking right at them and not realize it because they're there blending into the tree or the wood or wherever they may be on the ground.
Owls that are roosting during the day are easier to find because they typically are casting up their pellets. So the bones and fur they can't digest. They can't poop out just the way their system is organized. So they spit up a little hairball, and that accumulates under the roost. So you'll even see it in city parks under a nice big mature tree, and the owl's going to be up there, the great horned owl, and you can tell by looking for the gray pellets. They're sanitary. You can break them apart. Maybe wear gloves if you want to be super secure, but I do them barehanded, to be honest. And you can see what kind of rat rats and mice they've been eating by looking at the bones in their pellets.
You have such great information in your book, Nocturnalia, Nature in the Western Night. I encourage everybody to get a copy, look at the gorgeous pictures. It's easy to read, and it gives you a guidance of what to look for when you do go out in the night and how to do so. I wish we had time to talk about all the different animals and plants that you have presented. So please come back and we will continue our conversation about the love of nature and the need to save and preserve and protect it. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor to be with you today.
I have been speaking with Charles Hood, who is a professor emeritus at Antelope Valley College and author of over 20 books. I'm Nancy Perlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Perlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.